Hi, question. What do you get when you're looking for someone who has worked on AAA titles and indie soundtracks like Viscerafest? And consistently creates amazing covers and original work in the style of Doom Eternal. In this episode of Indie Insight, I sat down with video game composer and YouTube content creator Geoffrey, also known as GeoffPlaysGuitar, to talk about his work on the indie shooter Viscerafest, recent AAA FPS title Atomic Heart, and his collaboration with other creators on YouTube for the past 2 years. Let's just jump into it. So it's been, last time we talked, on an interview style format was in April 2021, so nearly 2 years ago now, which seems mind-blowing to me because on one hand it feels much longer than that for me. But I can't get over the fact, but maybe it's because you've done so much in 2 years that I feel like it's been nearly a decade. You've done a lot of work. You've grown exponentially. And I joked about, I think, at one point to you saying I'll have to retitle that first interview Before They Were Famous. And I think if we keep going the way we're going, I say if you keep going the way you're going, I might actually have to do that. You have to be extremely happy with the last 2 years.
Yeah, it has been a kind of a wild ride. It's a situation where I just never really expected to have all these opportunities sort of happen in such a short amount of time. And, seeing the growth of the YouTube channel and the people that I've been introduced to and talked to and become friends with over that time is something I didn't expect. It really does. It feels like 10 years. You're right. It's so quickly, it's just packed into such a small, I don't know, every single day there's like a lot of things going on. And I'm still sort of getting used to it, and it's very freeing, but it's also terrifying because there's just so many options about what to do next. And, looking kind of forward, there's this big question of like, how much further in one or another direction should I go? There's only one of me. So I don't know. It's, I'm just trying to keep my head above water and keep making good music. That's kind of where I'm at. It's just so wild, man. And it's really cool. I'm glad that we're interviewing because you had asked me a little while ago about giving you dibs on an interview.
Probably a bit too much.
Game comes out like this. No, but you know what? Hey, I'm happy to do it, and I really enjoyed the last time that we talked. So, I was pretty excited for round 2.
Yeah. Let me just put into perspective for listeners what has happened in the past 2 years, and I will evidently miss out on one or many things because you've done so much. So you've done musical work on both Viscerafest and Atomic Heart. You've released a wide range of remixes, covers, even original music, collaborating with loads of different creators in the Argent Metal scene and beyond. You've released, I believe it's 3 sort of sample packs, Argent Compressors, Cyber Metal Volume 1 and Argent Metal 2023. Have I missed out on anything since that?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's the games of the products and the remixes. Yeah, it's been a lot. Yeah, so much so that some stuff started to get delayed. There's more product stuff that I want to do that it has sort of fallen to the wayside just because of the time constraints on my end. And yeah, the working on the soundtracks, that was all. 2022 was like the year of the soundtracks for me because there were 2 different game projects that I was a part of. And yeah, and then, managed to squeeze in a couple of remixes during that time. I guess the only other thing is like, I'm lucky enough that I've been able to meet a few of my internet friends in person over the last year, meet a lot of musicians and other folks. And when I'm traveling, there's a chance that I'll know someone in that state or coming through the area. And I reach out and I'm like, we should meet up. Like we talk on the internet all the time. And like, that's the kind of stuff that I just never expected to happen. And it makes it so much more motivating for me to realize, to see some real faces and be like, these are the people that are kind of on the other end of hearing the stuff or that I've worked with. It's just so cool.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of stuff you've worked on the first interview we did, and I'm really annoyed that you didn't bring this up because it would have been a phenomenal part for my interview, is the fact that you left out, regardless of the size of the position, that you were credited in Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. And I am very disappointed by this because I know for a fact I would have found it had you not changed your name from Geoffrey Daigle. Is it Daigle or Daigle?
Yeah, my legal last name is Daigle.
Daigle today. And then that messed it up, yeah.
Well, the fact that you're asking me how to pronounce it is part of the reason why I changed it today, because I just want people to have an easy time with my name. And I was like, you know what? And that's my entire life is like that. Like every single day, people are like Geoff, or like, or my last name is just as difficult. It does look like Daigle, D-A-I, kind of gives that sound, but that's not it. And I'm like, I'll keep the Geoffrey because I think, it seems like it works and people can navigate Geoffrey. But my last name was a lost cause. I was like, we're doing the Bruno Mars thing. We're gonna stage name it, and folks who are lucky enough to find my real name, that's great. But you don't get anything extra from it. It's not like you can now start receiving my mail or something. Like, I don't know. I've just kind of adapted that persona. I don't know. It took a little bit of adjusting for me to like have people call me Day and me to be like, oh yeah, that's me, because that's like the name. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's just easier. That's the whole idea.
Yeah. Do you have people like when you do if you're on calls for potential work or whatnot, that call you Geoff Plays Guitar?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the first handle they saw. I do get a lot of fun variations where people call me Mr. Plays Guitar or things like that. I think it's funny. Yeah, but those are the two sides. I mean, Geoff Plays Guitar is primarily the name on all my accounts, because that's sort of what I started with, and it's sort of the cover song brand that I've built over the last 2 years. But in terms of the professional space, I'm trying to stick with Geoffrey Day. I just think it's better than looking like a product name. Like I want my actual name to be on, I think, the big important stuff. But now that I have the handles of Geoff Plays Guitar, I kind of am stuck with them. So that's probably where you're gonna see any more soundtrack work or whatever is going to end up under Geoff Plays Guitar. And whether or not people call me Geoff Plays Guitar or call me Geoffrey Day, that's the situation we're in. So, I'll live with whatever happens next.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it must be, specifically if we're looking at the games you've done recently, you give Viscerafest and also Atomic Heart. Like, if you're looking through the credits of those games, specifically Atomic Heart, because of the amount of people that worked on that title, and you see your name pop up, I mean, for me, it was kind of like, oh, cool, there's Geoff. Like, but what was it like for kind of you to see that? Because I imagine, at least in my head, that's such a big validating moment to see your name in the credits of a big project.
Yeah. I mean, definitely for Viscerafest being the first real soundtrack of original work that I had ever been a part of, getting that over the finish line and getting that out there was a moment for me. Like, I was just like, we've come all the way to the point of doing soundtracks now. Like, and when I say we, I mean me and the YouTube audience, because that was kind of a conversation I was having on YouTube a lot, which is I want to be doing this for games. I would like that. And then actually having that, and I did a video about it too, and people were with me celebrating that it's kind of happened, and that felt really good. And having more projects like that, and that maybe even eventually being the norm, which is kind of what I hope for, to just be doing kind of game projects and to bring a lot more, say, original work onto YouTube and things like that. I think, that's going to continue to feel pretty good, but it's early right now. There's a lot of question on how many of those opportunities are going to come through and things like that. So I'm not putting all my eggs in a basket yet.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking just on Viscerafest, is that a project that you maybe applied in, were inquiring about, or is it something they approached you with?
I had heard of Viscerafest because the main developer, is Osric, also known as Noah, on Twitter, posted a video of one of his levels with my Barbie girl cover on top of it. And people were like, oh, this is sick. Like, is this in the game? Whatever, and he's like, no, but I just found it on YouTube. It's cool. And I messaged him, or I replied to the tweet, and I was like, this is fun. I would do some original work for you if you need anything. Like, that sounds cool. And then nothing really came of it. But then a little bit later on, Marky, the original composer, left the project because he's now over 3D Realms. And Noah reached out to me directly on Twitter and was like, hey, do you want to do soundtrack work? Like, you replied to my thing. Your music seems pretty cool. I don't remember if he was like following my channel or not at the time. But it was just one of those small interactions that turned into an opportunity later because I had sort of showed up and he had already heard something I'd done. So it was kind of a natural fit, I think. And, complimenting Marky's work was a really, it was a good part of that experience to me as well. Marky is sort of I'd say legendary in the indie shooter metal music space with his Quake stuff. And it was just cool to be a part of that, and I got to talk to him too and stuff, and everybody's really awesome.
Yeah. I have to imagine that the probability of the track that people are coming to you knowing for a project, Barbie Girl, is probably not in the top 10.
Yeah, it's I was like, that's the one that opened the door. It's like that, or like if I had done, it's basically anything from the Doomify Every Song videos that I did. Like if somebody came to me and was like, yo, we heard the Donkey Kong cover you did, I'd be like, what? Like that was like 10 seconds of a joke, like, you know what I mean? But it's really funny, like you just never know where those connections are going to come from. So
yeah, well, some of those 10-second songs become some of your most popular songs, i.e. Slayer's Paradise, which is, I think, for some... Is it weird to you that that was the one that blew up on, say, all streaming platforms, mainly Spotify, I'm thinking of?
Not, well, so if you look at that guy, Aaron Jupiter, Aaron, I can't remember, Bianchi or something, last name, I'd have to check the actual name. If you check out Jupiter's work on Spotify, he has a bunch of songs that are kind of in a similar vein, which are these like meme songs turned doom. And it turns out that people listen to those a lot, right? And so seeing Slayer's Paradise jump up really quickly, I guess was a surprise, but also not a surprise. Like when I had done the original video of all the 10-second versions, I had so many comments like, please turn this into a real song. And that was a good signal for me to be like, maybe I should. Like, I don't really understand the meme. I'm just not quite, I'm kind of old. So like, you know, I'm keeping up about it the best I can. And, but that one just seemed like a no-brainer. So I was like, I'll do it. And as I was making the song, I was like, this works pretty well, actually. This is cool. And then, you know, people agreed with me and now they listen to it a lot. So that's kind of how that stuff works. I did make a joke, though, that, you know, it's funny that would be like my masterpiece. Like the one thing people remember me for is like a joke song that's a cover of Coolio. And I'm like, hey, Geoff, you got to do better. Like there's got to be other things you can do. You can't just, that can't be your number one forever. You know, that's what I'm trying anyway. That's my whole career now, is like surpass the meme song. Can I do it? So far, no, but we'll see.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about sort of remixes and kind of how you've incorporated that sort of familiar style into your work going forward a bit later on. But I do want to talk about Viscerafest a little bit more first. Obviously, you mentioned that Marky had worked on the project before you even got there. Kind of, you're kind of, I suppose, in a term, I suppose you're used to kind of having an established sound and riffing off that and working on that and trying to feel what the main sort of core elements of those are. Was it a similar approach to Viscerafest in that case as well, or how did you kind of approach that?
I think I came in with the understanding that the transition between Marky's work and mine needed to be really smooth. And Marky had already done one song on the second chapter of Viscerafest, which is what I was working on. And in order to make it not feel like it was just a hard cut between his music and mine, so we spent the whole first month trying to nail that sound down, which ended up being Hunting with Style, which is like the first track of mine in the second chapter. And the whole idea with that was like, can I get the mix exactly perfect to sound as close to Marky as possible? And even a little bit of it, people can tell that it's mine and not his, but I think stylistically and in terms of instrumentation, it's almost identical. You know, I EQ matched, I used the exact same guitar stuff that he was using, same drum set, everything. I asked him for all of his gear, and I did my best with that. And so we did that transition, and then I sort of like unraveled that over the next couple of tracks. And by the time we get to the end, although it's using a lot of the same stuff, it started to evolve into something that was a little bit more of my own. So that was kind of the idea with that transition. And then if you go back and listen to the first Marky soundtrack on chapter 1, you can tell that there's a stylistic difference between the two. But he really did set the tone for the whole thing. So it was funny, I didn't go in blind. You know, he had already finished a track that was essentially a demonstration of what was expected for chapter 2, which was helpful for me. So I had something to start with, and then I could just evolve it as we went along.
Yeah, I think the one thing, because I've played the game now, it's phenomenal. I really, really enjoy it. But the music particularly I really like, and I'm going to focus on chapter 2 because I'm talking to you and not Marquis. But with chapter 2, I think you have a really good way of kind of combining sort of horror or eeriness with this sort of metal sort of synthesizer style as well, that kind of makes it feel upbeat, but at the same time you're kind of unnerved. I mean, I think particularly of the track Cult Shuffle, which is the one that kind of has this weird sort of like I'm not sure what the instrument is, but a scraping string sound at the beginning. That kind of, it opens up kind of like spooky in a sense, and then it opens up into this more sort of grandiose, sort of traditional style, like boomer shooter song. What is it like? You know, what was the balance you were looking for when doing pieces like that, and how does that kind of work in the pieces?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so that bendy stuff, I actually had like a pretty limited set of instruments, and most of it was this like traditional Japanese type instrumentation. So we're talking like the koto and the shamisen, and you know, you get the taiko drums and a couple of other things. And so with Cold Shuffle specifically, what that is it's sort of an EDMification of, I believe it's the shamisen. So that has like, it's almost like a banjo, right? But it doesn't naturally bend like that. And I ended up sampling out the pick attack and the sustain in a couple of different notes, and then I sort of used that pitch bend in Ableton Live to create that kind of eerie, unreal bendy sound. And that changing, making instruments do things that they're not supposed to be doing, I think is a fun part of creative sound design for me, where you hear the natural instrument, but you're like, there's something different about it, and I can't put my finger on it. And it's like, oh, it's bending in a way that it just cannot actually do. And but I found ways to apply those principles through the whole soundtrack, trying to use these same instruments in a bunch of different ways. The number of individual tracks in each of these songs in my project was not actually very large. I wasn't breaking 100 lanes at any point, which is kind of typical of my Doom stuff. So the workflow was really different there, and as a result, you get quite a different sound for this soundtrack. Sounds like nothing I've ever actually done, just because the whole instrumentation is a totally different set of things, you know. But yeah, so, and it's those, and then the creepy sounds we're talking like the Shambler and some of the other, you know, the alien moments in that chapter 2. It's funny because I don't think in chapter 3, we haven't, at this point, we haven't signed any contracts or anything, but, you know, there's a chapter 3 in development. And if I were to work on that, I am unsure if there will be as much of that creepy stuff. I don't quite think it's the vibe. It's stuff that I like, but I think overall it's not quite the vibe that Noah was going for. I think he's more into the melodic, kind of like almost the bright, I would say almost some of the anime level tracks, like, you know, he's not a super guitar oriented person. So, you know, it's threading the needle between like the fun and the heavy, and the game's not supposed to be a mega creepy game or anything like that. So,
yeah. Speaking on just that as well, because that's a really interesting thing I want to talk about, is obviously you mentioned that Noah's a bit more just sort of the less guitar-y element, more anime style of tracks and that sort of way. What is it kind of, talk to me about the process of working with someone who's obviously developing the game, and it's their creative vision per se, but you also have your own, for lack of better words, you have your own needs for creating music. You want to do your own stuff as well. Like, what's the balance there, and how are you working back and forth with Noah to kind of create something that appeals to you both?
Yeah, totally. And it's worth knowing also, you should definitely talk to him, because he'll tell you happily all the stuff you want to know about the game. He's a really friendly person, very knowledgeable person. So, but it was good. The collaboration was really, really great. He does have a vision, and he does have thoughts about the individual moments of music and how that should be applied, and the types of expression that he's shooting for, where he wants the music to, the role that he wants the music to make in any individual part of the song, the types of themes and sort of what it's communicating. All those things are things that he's thought about. And so he'll send me sort of these briefs on, you know, what the level's supposed to be like, and, you know, what he's hoping to get from the music, and, you know, what types of things to focus on. And I think that stuff was very helpful. I would call that a hands-on approach, where the creative director or whoever's running the creative side of things knows exactly what they want out of it, but they don't have the skills to make it necessarily. So they hire somebody, and then I bring my expertise in, you know, I can translate that into something that I think actually executes on that vision, right? I do bring some of my own flavor to the table, and he's very accommodating when I'm like, I think we should do it this way, or, you know, I want to create this type of sound. And once he hears it, he kind of knows whether or not it's going to work or not work in his head. And that's pretty much the entire thing. We just did that until the song ended. And there was one actually really cool part too, where there are themes for individual characters. There's like Caroline's theme and Cronion's theme and stuff like that. And so we spent time working those themes into the music in specific moments to kind of be callbacks. And I actually really like that a lot, because you see that in a lot of award-winning soundtracks where they have these character themes that sort of show up in these big moments. And I got a chance to do that on this one. You know, there was a holistic approach to the soundtrack. And you know, when I listened to it front to back, I'm like, that having that guidance with his vision, it turned out for the best, because I think the soundtrack really does play out sort of. You can sort of imagine how the game goes based on the way that the soundtrack works. And to me, that's a win. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's another bit, because you mentioned kind of incorporating themes and whatnot into pieces. I'm interested to get your knowledge of this, because it's something that, you know, it seems apparent to everyone who even isn't into music, but it's not something that I really ever see people talk about, and that is the differentiation between getting your music in-game as opposed to in a sort of listenable soundtrack format. You know, obviously you've done your cover bits before, and I think probably one of the big comparisons I would have to it is when you did Fall of Davoth, which is sort of your alternate score for the ending of the second DLC of Doom Eternal. People were kind of interjecting that into the game, and as fantastic as that track is, I don't think it works in the format of the actual boss fight at all. What is it like? So for you then, you know, you've got your soundtrack piece, you're obviously looking to make an enjoyable soundtrack for people to listen to, but you also need to make something that's, you know, that flows with the gameplay as well. What is sort of what's the differentiation there that maybe people don't know about?
Yeah, well, the big thing is the more testing that can be done, the better. So I get really nervous when it comes to being so hands-off, where I'm making something and I'm just handing it to the team, because if I can't test something in maybe Fmod or WWise or at least see what the implementation looks like, I'm going to have a hard time knowing if I have created something that flows well, especially if pieces are randomized, because I think that's like maybe the more challenging part, is writing in chunks if you're going to do something like that. And the other thing is, anytime you do a soundtrack like that, which is the reason that Fall of Davoth doesn't work, is you need a certain amount of content for all of that stuff to start to make sense. So when people took the Davoth fight and took my song and broke it up, what you hear is they took like the first third of the song and they put it in the first phase. They put the second part of the song in the second phase. Well, actually, they put it in the last phase. And then they took the middle part and they put it, or the end part, and they put it in the middle. And the reason it doesn't really work is because there's just not enough content, that it sort of is the same 2 or 3 parts sort of repeated over and over again. And then the transitions between those parts are not super smooth, because I didn't write the song with randomization in mind, with these like sort of anything can add to, or start and end with anything chunks, you know, like the seams are just made specifically for the next part. So you get these like really weird kind of, it sounds like the song kind of skips to the next part. And those are the types of things you have to just plan for if you're working in that environment. When it comes to Viscerafest, I didn't have to do that. The songs are actually single song loops. So the song plays front to back and then it starts over again. So the only loop that I had to take into consideration was the beginning and the end of the song. So as long as I can put the song butt to butt, or I don't know, front to butt, there's, you know, whatever. As long as you could put the song end to end into a DAW, and in my case an Fmod, because I was the one doing the implementation. And as long as those transitions are smooth and seamless, then I was good. And that was a lot less to worry about, because it was just single songs. But then I would have to do that from level to level. So we wanted to do cooler transitions than just crossfades. So in a level of Viscerafest, let's say there's 2 to 3 individual tracks that play during the course of that level. So I needed to figure out how to make those tracks transition on the cue, sometimes back and forth to each other, in a way that sounded very sort of planned, but not just, the crossfade is like just the easiest kind of brute force, you know, new music is coming in, but we wanted it to be more stylistic. So I had to plan those tracks in advance. So a good example of this is Cult Shuffle into Punching for Science. So Cult Shuffle plays right up until you get to the basement of that level, and then Punching for Science comes in. Punching for Science is the same key and the same speed. And I needed to create a drum fill that would work to kind of like, at any point in Cult Shuffle, to transition into that song. And you'll notice in Punching for Science, there's a callback to Cult Shuffle. There's actually the same melody as in that menu part. And because those were made together. So a warning comes right after Punching for Science, and that's, again, the transition is made so that it leaves Punching for Science at any point in the song, and that it retains the same speed, and it's mostly the same key. And so the feel, it's basically like you have one giant song that's broken into sections, kind of like what if Bohemian Rhapsody was like, you know, a full level. That's kind of the idea. And those are the things you have to you have to think about if you're doing it that way. But it really comes down to the way that the game organizes music, right? How does it do? How is the music expected to be? Is it, you know, you have quiet parts and combat parts? Is it, you know, parts of levels? Are there specific cues that certain music has to come at certain times? So all that stuff just needs to be considered. And you end up writing songs around that. And sometimes it's really amazing to see how soundtracks end up on Spotify after the fact, because a lot of that music is written for the game cues and stuff. And then you have to go back and be like, well, how do we make this sound like it's even listenable? I'm in a situation where I haven't had to do that yet. I haven't really written anything that didn't have a full song in mind ahead of time yet. But I'm sure that there would be a situation like that where, you know, I'll just be writing a lot of kind of one-offs and things like that, and I'll need to combine them into something, especially if I do an adventure game or a linear action type thing. I would have to think about how all that stuff gets packaged up, but I haven't done it yet. So
yeah. The thing I want to know as well, most importantly, do you name the tracks?
I name them, yeah.
Okay. Any reasons behind it?
Well, so far, actually, when it comes to Viscerafest naming, I named almost all of them, but Noah chipped in on a couple because he had some cool ideas about things, and I was like, that sounds like a great name. So we'll do that. So, but for the most part, I came up with all the names, and part of the Viscerafest thing was like, we wanted each track to have a fun name because that was already what was happening in Chapter 1, and having quirky naming in all of the individual pieces is just a part of the game. So having those names was an important thing. And I like naming stuff. I do it with all my sample packs too. I name every sample something fun and whatever, you know, and I just come up with stuff. And then for any of the other projects that I've ever worked on, having a name to start is good. And whether or not they want to keep that or change it, it's up to the team, right? But for Viscerafest, I'd say creative control over the naming for the most part. So that was fun.
Yeah. I know when we last spoke, which again is a while ago, so I don't expect you to remember, but when we last spoke, we were talking a little bit about what sort of pieces you would specifically like to compose for. And you mentioned at one point that you were interested in doing something sci-fi sort of FPS style, because you mentioned that stuff like Halo and Crysis kind of have this more orchestral effect, but you kind of proposed the idea of, well, what if they didn't? What if it was more synthy and sort of grimy in that sense as well?
Yeah.
Do you think you've achieved that with Viscerafest, or do you still think that that's maybe a bit off from what you're hoping to do?
Well, Viscerafest is very much indie in its flavor, right? It is like, it comes off like an indie title because that's what it is. And the soundtrack has to sort of support what you're seeing on screen. And so the soundtrack was written with this indie, you know, sort of pixel art style in mind, right? And I don't think that's what a reboot of Crysis would sound like. I think like the idea is there, you know, I think it's cool. And you hear this now more with other types of shooters where you're starting to hear these kind of synthy, almost like dance music kind of beats, a lot of drum machine oriented things that when action starts going, it's a lot less straight up orchestral. There's electronic drums and there's some hybrid stuff going on. So I still think there's room to do that. I'd say to date, I really haven't, not like the stuff that I've described for those types of games. I don't think I've done anything quite like that yet. But I'm inching closer. There's I'm sure it'll happen. I'm hoping it will happen sometime soon.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think everyone's hoping it'll happen. Let's talk a little bit more about a more recent game that everyone's been talking about. It's been hot on the press for a number of different reasons, but Atomic Heart, you've obviously worked on it with two other composers, one of which is obviously Mick Gordon, which, you know, we'll talk about in a little bit, but how thrilled are you with your contributions to that project, first of all? Because, I mean, I saw a few of them in the Volume 1 soundtrack. I'm not sure if that's all of them yet that have come out, but for the most part, I mean, it all sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd say for when they brought me on to the project, which was pretty much like, they were ready to ship this thing. It was like we were almost at the finish line, or the game was almost at the finish line by the time I got added. So things were made quick, and for what I was asked to do, and the fact that I had, although it wasn't originally part of our contract, but it sort of developed as we were working together. The fact that I was given an opportunity to do a couple of original pieces, I'd say now that the project's over and getting to hear it and see people's positive reactions for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. I think that that music, working on that stuff really pushed me in a direction in terms of my workflow and being able to take material that really had never been given this kind of treatment before and trying something totally different. I'd say yes. I especially, I know it's probably not going to be considered one of the more popular ones, but with the track For the Good of Mankind that I did, I think that one really pushed me in a direction. I tried something totally out there, given the context, which, by the way, I was just given almost no context for the entire time that I was working on the game. So a lot of it was just guesswork for me. And, you make the song and you're like, here you go. And they're like, oh, sick. And then it ends up in the game. And I'm like, okay. But that was, For the Good of Mankind was the one that I could see, I got footage of ahead of time. And I actually got a little bit of music ahead of time too. I'm not going to spoil anything about where it is in the game if you haven't played, but for the first time, I sort of heard what it was going to be for and where it was and what was coming before it. And I was like, okay, well, I wish I had this earlier, but I think I can make something that sort of fits that. It naturally fits into things, right? And it forced me to do a bunch of stuff that I have never really tried to do before. And that one, I think, is the closest one to my soundtracky combat music. Like, it was written with a soundtrack in mind. Like, it was not a cover, it was a soundtrack song. And I want to be doing a lot more of that stuff. But those things, what's funny is, like, in terms of popularity and how much people are listening to stuff, it's not that type of song that people really want to hear. Like, I did another original which is just blistering heavy metal, and people are like, yeah, that's sick, like that's awesome, like that's what they want to hear. And I'm like, it's all trade-offs, just trying to figure out what the right move is at any given time and whatever. And yeah, I was given very little context for pretty much all of it. And it's just cool to see how it all ended up, because I think I was learning about things at the same time that everyone else was. And they're working with tons of artists, so like I can't say that like my contributions are not any more special than all the other folks that were on the soundtrack as well. So I think I just got lucky that I was able to do a couple of originals during that process, which puts me in the composer category as opposed to just a remixer category. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely sounds like a completely different approach from Viscerafest though with regards to music.
100% different. Yeah, it was very transactional, and not a bad transactional, just a very like, so you have no notes? You're like, cool, like great, I'll move on to the next one. Like it was one of those. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. What would have been like? Because I know, again, when we previously talked, you mentioned a bit about because obviously the idea of coming up to scoring a Doom game at the time was kind of like, oh, Geoff might do a Doom game. What would he do if he did that? And you were kind of like, you wouldn't really want to emulate some of what Mick Gordon has done before, because obviously, he does that extremely well. Right. But alongside that, how did you find yourself in this project? Because obviously Mick works on this project as well. But I suppose, firstly, before I jump into that, how much sort of collaborative work did you have with Mick, or was there any sort of, and of course the other remixers and composers as well, was there much there? Was it kind of everyone working on their own and kind of submitting stuff?
Yeah, zero collaboration with Mick. We didn't even in terms of working on the soundtrack, we didn't overlap. Like, I think he was done with his stuff before I even started on mine. So, yeah, we didn't overlap at all. I chatted with him really briefly, but like there's no working together. So we all did separate stuff. And now that I'm seeing the soundtrack, or at least the first part of the soundtrack, and seeing, I'm seeing some game rips and things like that, I'm sensing that a lot of it was developed in that way, where it was all kind of, everybody sort of did their thing, and then there was a person, one of the composers is also the audio director, and I'm sure they just combined everything together at the end and presented it in the game in the way that they thought it made the most sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I think anyway.
Yeah, it certainly seems like an interesting way of creating a score for a game, all right.
It's one way to do it, for sure.
Yeah. Obviously, the volume 1 that's been released so far that we know of, at least, has a lot of stuff that you've done with remixes to already pre-existing songs. Now, when I say remix, I mean remix in the strongest sense. Like, these are completely revamped and rejigged songs that have, if you were to hear the originals, which you did on your live stream, are just so completely off the wall different.
Yeah.
Did you feel, was it a sense of familiarity because you had done the remixes and cover style before that when going into this? Did it seem like, okay, well, I know what I'm doing here. This is my sort of bread and butter?
Yeah, in a way. So going back to a part of a earlier question that you asked, when they reached out to me, the team contacted me. I wasn't say trying to demo for them or anything. They directly reached out to me and said, "Hey, we would love for you to do some remixes. You know, we've heard of your work or whatever." So I and Mick being on the game and me having a YouTube channel sort of based on Mick's work, I was like, well, this is an opportunity I probably shouldn't say no to. So I started with that, and knowing that they had already heard my work, I think that was the understanding that I would be making things also the same way. I like it. It would be, that's just generally how, you know, people reaching out to other people in the space works. It's like, hey, I heard this thing you did. I want that too. Can you do that? But like with my stuff. And so that's what most of that development was like. But as we sort of went along and as I started to get more context and as I was doing stuff, I realized that I didn't have to sort of beat a dead horse on the Doom style covers thing. Like I didn't want this to come off as a bunch of Doom ripoff music. I wanted it to be, I understood that some of these were pretty famous songs and, you know, I'm not very familiar with the original content. Like I was hearing all these songs for the first time and I wanted to do something that I think fit what I was hearing, fit the style of the game, regardless of where they ended up putting it in the game, and was good listening material. You know, like what if this person was in a band and did this music, doing it the way that I would want to hear it? And I sort of approached it like that. And in almost every single case, the team said, "This is great. Thank you so much. Like, please do more." And that was a good situation. And now hearing actually the varied soundtrack, I'm you know, it's interesting because it makes me realize like I was a little bit worried about creative lockdown, like only being able to make certain sounds and needing it to be a certain way. And then now I'm realizing like they had this gambit of different styles that they were always planning on releasing. And, you know, I feel as I started to learn that, it let me relax a little bit and try to do different things as the soundtrack went along. And you'll notice that I have a variety of different styles in those remixes. And I didn't try to force anything. And I think it turned out for the best.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, talking on that a little bit, because obviously you mentioned that there's obviously somebody behind the scenes who kind of compiled all of these pieces together and put them in the best way they know how. It obviously a complete stark shift from working on Viscerafest, where you very much have a hands-on experience with crafting the sound for that game. Is it kind of like, were you, I'm going to assume that you didn't hear any of Mick's work while the game was being produced or whatever. So was that a worry for you, being like, what if I'm doing something completely wrong here? Like, what if it's completely different?
The entire time. And as soon as I got the opportunity to do original work, I was like, I'm going to make something that sounds like it doesn't belong in the game. I don't have a clue what the soundtrack is supposed to sound like. And I used a lot of reference material from older trailers. I did use like Mick's trailer from a couple of years ago as like a good starting point. Only because I think folks were expecting to hear more of that just because it was in a trailer. So I was like, well, there's no downside in doing a little bit more of that. But no, I never heard any of what he was working on. I hadn't heard any of the soundtrack from any of the composers. I was completely in a silo when I was doing this. And it was just guesswork. So I was just making my best guess. And I think it turned out okay. You know, like I think some of them worked pretty well. I'm pretty happy with like PT1X or PT1X12. Especially. I think that one worked pretty well. I wish I had more opportunities to do more just like that, but that's just not how the contract, you know, actually was. You know, I sort of was just taking things as they came and everything was moving 200 miles a second. So, you know, you can't plan for that stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, question then is, have you played the game yet?
I played a little bit of it. Yeah. I haven't had a ton of time to dig in, but I put in a couple of hours right when it came out. Haven't heard my own music in the game yet because it doesn't happen for the first couple of hours. But yeah, I've been in there. Have you been playing?
I have played a good bit of it now. Unfortunately, I've had to put it down a little bit because there's just so much stuff going on at the moment and stuff going around. And I have a number of other bits and pieces that I'm working on, but outside of that, I've been like every waking moment I can get a chance, I'm like, particularly with this interview coming up, I was like, I need to play more of this game.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I suppose it's actually, I would argue, the best sort of it's almost like a palate cleanser if you play Viscerafest, because it's a completely different sort of genre in that sense, and everywhere in every sort of shape and mean.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's straight. Is it strange to you like that you moved from something so quickly like Viscerafest over to Atomic Heart? And is it a case that if the next project came up, you'd want it again to be sort of starkly different to the last one, or would you like to maybe hone in a little bit more on what you've kind of been continuing to craft?
That's a tough question, because I think from a branding standpoint, from what people are hoping to hear from me, doing a lot of the same is usually better. You know, getting more heavy metal, getting or more of the type of soundtrack. That's how people start to follow you and like you, because they hear something and they're like, oh, I got to be around for more of the, if they drop more music like that, right? That's why, like, I would be really confused if Metallica dropped a jazz album, you know, like, we like them for a reason, right? But from a creative point and from a learning standpoint, I would love to be doing all sorts of different stuff, because I want to build all those skills. Like, I would love to do orchestral stuff. I would love to do things that aren't metal, because I have those skills, and they're sort of drying out on the, you know, a line somewhere, because I haven't had a chance to really use them. I want to use them. So like, I don't mind doing that stuff, but I think there's a middle ground. I think like there can be situations where, you know, games are very dynamic, and many of them have ups and downs and emotional moments and action moments and that stuff. And I think there will be, and I say I think there will be, but I don't know. I hope there will be opportunities where I can be able to practice and really lean into the things that I think are underutilized. You know, being able to do the more emotional cues, while still having a chance to do the action music, which is just something I have the most practice in, because that's all I've been doing. So, and it doesn't have to be metal. Like, I can do metal, but as you've heard in some of the other soundtracks, I don't need to, you know, like, you can get that same heavy combat, you know, driving music with anything, really. You know, it's just about the way that you approach it. So I really hope that there will be chances to lean into that stuff in the future.
Yeah. Like, obviously, a lot of your, like, old stuff, I say old now, and I take that as, don't take that with offense, but, like, a lot of your stuff, I mean, particularly, like, beginning covers on Geoff Plays Guitar were very much orchestral stuff, a lot of it. And even before that, you did a lot of EDM stuff. I'm particularly referencing Night Bandit, which I need to know. I need to know, will Read a Book be getting a revamp anytime soon?
Yeah. No, probably not. It's like, so you could probably tell, like, a lot of Night Bandit stuff was really just silly. And the part of that journey, and there's some stuff that I did right after Night Bandit and some stuff that I did before, and this was me just not having a good, it was almost like a personal crisis. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted to be doing. I didn't really know how that people should be receiving my music. I knew that I was kind of cynical about making music and, you know, making these joke songs that are technically good but don't have any real, like, repeat listening substance. It's because I just didn't understand how people listen to music. I didn't understand what I wanted out of my own music. I didn't see myself really as an artist. I kind of just saw myself as a person who wanted people to hear my music. And it took some real kind of self-reflection, and especially during kind of the COVID lockdown time when I started up the channel, that's when I started making some pretty serious decisions about, you know, what do I want out of this, and what kind of path do I want to follow, and am I going to be okay with it? You know, like, there's just an emotional thing. I think a lot of folks struggle with this, where they just don't really know. They want the feeling of success, but they just want it to happen. They don't want to kill themselves to do it, and I don't want to kill myself to do it either. But, you know, you just constantly feel like you don't have the pieces in place. And that's what I was doing during the Night Bandit stuff. So much so that I didn't even really understand that Metal Gear Rising was like a thing that would be popular. And hearing it, seeing it blow up in the last year, I was like, what? I was on that game. Like, I barely gave a crap while I was working on that game. I was like so sleep deprived and like just making it work. And I just didn't care that much. And now looking back on it, I'm like, I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into back then. You know, I was too wrapped up in my own world, you know, and I'm kind of just lucky I was able to make some decisions and be like, this is what I want to be doing. And then, you know what happened? The minute I did that, it sort of guided the path, and I got, you know, I really leaned into the technical aspects of stuff, And I learned to really love music and all sorts of different kinds of things and how the craft works and who the people are and the stories that go along with it. And, you know, then the YouTube channel stuff started and then the rest is history. You know, it's, I tried to separate myself from it a little bit. You know, it's making music. It's not a life or death game for me, for anybody really. It shouldn't be. You know, it should be a thing that you enjoy and a thing that you can connect with other people about. And that's what it should be. It doesn't always end up being that way, but you know, at its core, it's coming at it from that angle. I think that's the right way for me anyway, to keep going and keep making music.
Yeah, and that's certainly the way, at least to me, that your channel comes across, like this sort of, not so much like your own work, but almost like an expansion of Argent and all that other work that you're doing alongside it with other people. And collaboration seems to be playing this much bigger role than from when I interviewed you back in 2021. Over those few years, you've collaborated with numerous people and even spoke to some of the composers of the original tracks. I mean, what's the name of the Devil May Cry one? It's annoying me now. Oh, what's
Bury
the name
the
of
Light?
it? Yeah, Bury the Light. Yeah, obviously you talked to Casey Edwards about that and everything about it. And then you've obviously worked with a number of other great people, including, I want to touch on one note, because it does kind of almost, as we talk about, like you mentioned earlier, with sort of getting the two ends to work on a song, this is kind of like the two ends of your career kind of coming side by side, which is collaborating with the Maniac Agenda for Revengeance. Was that, what was it like going back to that? Because obviously I'm assuming there wasn't this huge sort of communicative approach between you when you first did the stuff for Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, because it was just such a, like, it was a small bit to do and they asked you to do a little bit and all that. But kind of coming back to it, what was that like, kind of revisiting this old game that you had almost forgotten about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I went back and I played the game and I was just like, this game is so much more ridiculous than I ever thought it was going to be, right? I remember when it came out, I was just like, oh, it's Metal Gear, but it's not really. And there's like the slow-mo sword thing. And I was like, that's sick. That's as far as I really understood. But then what happened is like meme culture took over. And when you actually play the game, you're like, wow, like this game is definitely just ridiculous for so many reasons. And then I'm not surprised that it blew up, because the game itself, like I was playing the game, I'm like, these controls are terrible, but the game is hilarious, right? The game is fun, but it just, it's like, I was like struggling to jump. Like I was like, it's just not optimized for like modern gameplay. So, because that's what it came out. But it was just so funny to be able to revisit that. And working with them was really interesting because we hadn't talked in a decade. I didn't think they were going to get back to me, to be honest. Like I was surprised that they remembered who I was, and I was surprised that they were down to do this. They were thinking about doing some covers on their own anyway. So it was just like, oh, we're all doing this together at the same time? Like, why don't we just work together? And it was really awesome. I was reaching out. I didn't get in contact with any of them, but I was reaching out to a lot of the original singers. So we were chatting about, like, maybe we should... I was proposing, like, hey, I would love to get the original singer on there. I think it would be cool. I don't really know what they're up to. And then the guys from the Maniac Agenda were like, oh, you know, Sasha can sing now. They didn't do that much during the soundtrack and stuff like that. But here's some original work. And I listened to it and I was just like, wow, like this is gonna work great. Like, Sasha's a great singer. So we just went for it. And I got a bunch of sounds, and Viberium, the other guy, is a good DJ and a sound designer, so he sent me a bunch of stuff, and I sort of did it all together. And I was working with Andrew Baina, and I got his parts, and so I sort of combined everything together, and it was just a great experience. And it's cool because, like, we all just chat now, you know, like we catch up every so often, and it's just a funny way to reconnect with folks that you never thought. I just didn't really think that hard about it, and I didn't realize everybody was kind of all in the same boat together. It was just fun. Everything. It was just a fun time, and people really liked the song. I think that's the most rewarding part. Is the song is doing really well, and a lot of notable folks chimed in and were like, said some nice things about it, and it's doing well on Spotify. It's just great. You know, it rewards everybody. We did the splits, you know, for royalties, so everybody's getting a little bit of cash from it too. So that's nice. Not a lot, but you know, we know how Spotify works. It's nobody's getting rich, so it's fun. It's just great.
It always just continues to amaze me at, like, the idea that a game as ridiculous as Metal Gear Rising Revengeance can, like, still at the end of it have a really wholesome story of, like, people coming back together again for, like, something like this.
Right.
And to think it probably wouldn't
Nano
never have
machines,
happened
son.
had that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It probably would have never happened had the game not blown up. Is the even more like interesting bit about it.
Yeah.
So memes have kept it alive for the better.
Yeah. It has.
But you've done so much like with regards to collaboration over the last few years. Is there anything in particular that stands out to you as like, I mean, whether it was the first collaboration you did or maybe one's couple of down the line, like what was the most, I suppose, entertaining or more the one you got the most joy out of, would you say?
Yeah. Well, I as I just said, the Metal Gear Rising cover, that was just there were just so many parts to that. Now, I think there was a little bit of stress involved too, because when you start coordinating a bunch of people to do a song, like there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of schedules get all messed up and whatever. So I was definitely a little bit stressed during like the final stages of that. But the end result was totally worth it. And it was just fun all around, and people can see how much fun we were having with it. In terms of other ones, I got to work with Dave Levy. I think that one's really cool. We worked on the Dark Souls one, and then with Game Music Collectives, that was a surprise for me, because I had been listening to Game Music Collective and seeing their orchestral and choir stuff that they're doing, and like the Halo. They did a Halo video right after of a bunch of real monks singing the Halo theme in a real church, and that one just blew up. And I was like, the fact that they had seen my channel, because they had commented on a couple of things that I did, and I was when I reached out to them, they responded and they're like, yeah, we should work together. And I was like, what? Like, that's wild. So working with them, and they did a recording where some of the folks who sing in their choir did the men's choir for that song, and that was really awesome. And then being able to work with David Levy and seeing his workflow, and he mixed the song as well. So I sent a bunch of stuff over, and then he's like, dude, I got all the gear, like, let me do the mix and master. And I'm like, yeah, sick. So he did that, and I listened to that song a lot, and I'm like, dang, that one sounds so good. Like, all the parts of that fit together, having real people in it just added so much value. And that was really cool. That was another good example of just meeting folks kind of along the way and working together. And I think, like, when you work with folks that end up either are your friends or end up becoming your friends, it sort of brings you closer together, because you learn about each other as you go through the process, and what each person kind of brings to the table, and then you find ways to support each other when things get bumpy, which it always does, and always takes longer than you expect. And then asking David to do some video stuff, and asking Game Music Collective what the deal is with the video stuff, and figuring all that out. And like it's just so funny, like the factory of making the behind the scenes like workflow is just chaos sometimes, but then you get the final product back and you're like, it just reminds you of all those things that happened. So I'd say those two are big ones. There's more. I mean, I've done a million with Bana at this point, and working with Bana and Johnny has always been a breeze. Those two are just straight up professionals, and they know how to do content, they know how to make music quick, and they're super talented. And I got to meet them actually a couple 2 weeks ago or something like that. And so meeting them in real life was just a joy for me, because I'm like, we did so much together. Like it's just so nice to meet you guys. And I watched them play in their show, and they were awesome. So yeah. And there's more stories, I'm sure, if I looked at my catalog, but my brain is not working that well today for some reason. So I can't remember everything, but yeah, we'll stick with those two for now.
I think the amazing thing as well is, regardless of like how much your general content or like production has gone up, you've always kept that high question with the gray background and white text at the beginning of the video.
Yeah.
Has that been just a conscious effort, being like, yeah, I want to keep that, or is it just like, nah, we don't need to change that?
Well, there comes a point. So I started with that's the format that started all the way on day one. And I like videos that have a sort of a tag to them, something just at the beginning and the end, are like things that I just do, right? But it's the same as like a lot of other guys do it. Like what's his name? Penguin Zero.
Yes,
Big Charles. He always says "see ya" at the end of his videos, right? That wasn't something that I stole from him, but I just realized, I was like, people do this type of stuff too. Like it's just, you kind of get used to the template and the format. And when other folks started repeating high question back to me as a joke, I started to realize, I was like, well, I can't get rid of it now, right? So when I start a video with high question, it's almost always that cover song format, right? I've done other videos where I haven't put that in there, but anytime I do like a standard cover with the exploration and the research time and whatever, it's got to start with high question, because if I don't do that, people are going to say something because I've always done it, right? It's kind of like, my name is Geoff Plays Guitar. If I change my name to something else, people are going to be like, where's Geoff Plays Guitar? Like, you're stuck with it. They're like, that's how it is now. And that's fine with me. It's fun. You know, content should just be fun. Or at least this kind of content, right? And if it's anything else other than fun, when it comes to making cover songs anyway, I think that there has to be a message there. But it's for this type of stuff, if it's not fun, I missed it. You know, that's all it's about. It's just having a good time listening to something be heavy metal for no other reason than because why not? You know, that's what the content is.
The way I when I'm talking to people and I'm kind of recommending your channel to them, I always kind of, the way I describe it, it's like, imagine there's a man in a suit and he has earphones on and he's listening to the most heaviest metal ever, and he's the least likely person you'd expect to love metal. And then as soon as he gets into his house on his own, then he starts dancing. That's how I pitch your channel, because that's very much the vibe I get from it. Because even you have to admit, some of your videos, you're like starting up the openings and it's got this sort of nice coffee bar jazz like in the background, and then it just goes into like, it feels like you've just been hit by a train from hell like halfway through when you get into the music. I mean,
it's kind of cheeky, isn't it? Yeah. A lot of that's not like, I'm not trying to take the content too seriously. This is like almost, you know, how did you do Night Bandit, Geoff? Why did you make stupid songs like that? And like, you know, me choosing smooth jazz as my background is like, because I'm the same person, you know, like I still just, I like comedy. I like things that are completely contrasting from each other because it's funny, you know, like I like those things. And having metal only show up during the cover, but everything else be totally family friendly, you know, it's like, I think I enjoy that. And there are moments when I'll add metal or whatever, but also just the vibe of like when I'm doing dialogue, listen to my voice. Like, first of all, my voice isn't even very good for heavy metal. Like I have a very like, it's like a boy band voice. Like it's just not, I don't know, it's not very good. So having jazzy stuff and whatever, I think it just fits the podcast style of the dialogue stuff better. I don't know. And it's been that way for a while, so it's just through repetition, it's sort of become the style that people have come to expect, and I don't dislike it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. I think I wish that there was like a deeper meaning behind a lot of that stuff, but there isn't. There's no good reason to do jazz. You know, maybe I'll do polka in the next one. Maybe I'll have something epic orchestral. It's whatever. The last video I did with Elden Ring had this kind of film noir murder mystery kind of vibe to it. That was intentional. That was like me just wanting to try something, I don't know, because I was just in the mood for it. Because like there's no, I totally broke the template, the format in that case, right? And there's no downside. People were just like, this video is fun, like it's cool you did that. It adds a little variety, it keeps things from being stale. I'm not much of a filmmaker, but it gives my editor something different to do. I think he enjoys that. I hope so. That, or I gave him way too much work to do. But no, we actually had an extra week on that one, so that has a relaxed pace. But yeah, anyway, that's what I'm thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, that's the point I want to bring up as well, because you do have an editor now helping you with the videos. How much more has that sort of opened you up to be allowed to be a bit more creative with the way in which you're presenting the work?
Not at all. I feel like I just haven't gained any time back. There's always more stuff to do. It is nice to be able to give it to an editor, though, because I think he's better at the video stuff than I am. I know what I am shooting for, but my editor is a friend of mine, and he understands pacing and timing, and he makes his own content too, comedy content, and I know that he knows what I'm thinking when it comes to the style and the stuff like that. So 9 times out of 10, there's no notes when I get stuff back. I'm like, yeah, you nailed it. You know exactly what. And I also script everything out too. So it's a little bit plug and play where he knows the order of things. And one thing that I really like that he brings to the table, having an editor is good, because if they're a creative person, they add things during the creative process as an editor. So not as me. It's so funny to have an editor make moments in videos where you know it's the editor making fun of the person on the screen, and it's not them deciding to do it themselves. Like it feels meta, but you know it's the editor. So I love those moments, because it's almost like when you watch like cooking content, and you have the person talking on camera, and then you hear the person in the background telling them something. I don't know if you've ever seen those, where they like make a comment and you just hear them in the background. But that kind of back and forth is kind of what's happening there, where the editor is saying things to the audience as the person behind the camera. And I really like that. I think that just adds a whole nother level that I wasn't bringing, because it was just me doing the content before. So he's a good asset. I like, his name's Dan, also known as Space Bear on the internet, and can't recommend him enough. We just shot a music video together. He's very good at what he does all across the board.
Fantastic. We've talked loads about a load of different stuff that you've worked on, and I feel like we still haven't touched the tip of the iceberg, but I do have maybe a couple of final closing questions just to finish us all off. These are very general, so please do not judge my interviewing techniques off these final few questions.
Oh, no worries.
But I thought they were interesting, and they'd open it up to you to kind of, attack in any way you want. What's the most sort of difficult piece you produced then to date?
The most difficult piece to date? Probably, I'm going to say it's from Atomic Heart. It's the Stoya Devchanki cover. And that one, the reason it was really hard was because the song, this is a remix, and the song itself didn't present itself well to being made into something heavier. The intention was really to make a lot of these into combat tracks, and to have, they had like the environmental stuff already figured out. So, but that one, I wanted to do something. It was a very old song, so I wanted to do something where all the instruments sound like they've been recorded with old microphones as well. But the sound design is modern. So it's almost this weird combo of like, well, it sounds like it was recorded in the 50s, but they didn't have those synthesizers back then. And I think like that's a perfect, like Atomic Heart environmental thing, right? Because that's what the concept of the game is about. But the song itself is just, it's like, what do I do with it? So I did a bunch of variations of it. The tempo it's like 150. So I struggled with that one a little bit. And as I was listening to her singing and watching the gameplay and stuff, I'm just like, this isn't working. Like, I was getting stressed out. This is one of the last songs I did. And there came a point when I just decided to extend the song and don't do the vocals and just make it combat so they have it. And then I went back and I went, well, if I was just to make this song, like, who knows if it'll even make it in the game, if I were to make this song something that I would want to listen to on Spotify, because it'll probably get published as a full song. What do I need to do? And I turned it into this like indie disco sort of thing. And, I think if you take the picture of Atomic Heart away and you don't look at it and you just listen to the song, I think it stands on its own. And it ended up being one of my favorite remixes of that group, because it's one that really leans into like, it takes the idea of the vocals and sort of interpolates, right? Extrapolates, interpolates. It makes it the whole song is based on that. And I think it ended up, it was the one that had a couple of revisions, and I think it needed them. And I'm generally pretty happy with where that one ended up. But that one just, there were days when I was just sitting at the computer, just listening to it over and over again, going, what? I don't know what to do with this. Like, it's not doing the thing that I was hoping for. And there's not much I can do without changing the vocals considerably, and it'll make the song not as good. So I just did my best. And it constantly, my computer was at 100% CPU. It was maxed out. This was before mastering. I was like, one of my synths apparently hogs. I use one synth and it takes like 25% CPU. I can't remember which one it is. Yeah, it's bad news. So I was like, the song is like skipping, trying to play, and I'm like, but I'm not even done yet. Like, I was getting so frustrated. But it all worked out in the end. And I think that one, I'm happy with how that turned out. But that was tough. I was pulling my hair out with that song. Yeah, none of the others really had such a strong, on my own anyway. There have been situations where I've been frustrated with like the song not being accepted by the team, right? I have been in situations like that, and I've been like, okay, fine, it's frustrating to like have to go back and redo something over and over again. But this is the one where I was completely on my own, just going, I'm frustrated at myself. Like, so I'd say that's so far, that's been the most challenging one for me.
Yeah. Do you enjoy listening to that, or do you just think of the pain?
No, I think it actually turned out quite good. because I stepped back, like on its own anyway. I don't, in terms of the game implementation stuff, not so sure. But in terms of the final product, I actually think that by stepping away from it and going, let's just make it something that's good to listen to, and not trying to make it anything too much more than that, I was able to make a couple of key changes to make it a very pleasant song. I think, sound design wise and pacing wise, I like it a lot better now. As I said, it's actually one of my favorites of all of the ones, more than the heavy metal stuff. I think that one just, I like the sound design challenge, and that one felt the most like a sound design challenge to me.
Another as fantastically crafted question as the last one. What's been your favorite piece that you've done so far then?
Favorite piece ever? Oh man,
God, it sounds so worse when you say it like that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I've just done so many. It's like okay. I mean, the easy answer to that is my favorite piece is always the last one I've ever done. It's like for some reason I get very into the music that I do, and I obsess over each individual song, and so at the time they all become my favorites. And then after the fact when I release them, I have a hard time being overly attached to any one particular song because I've done so many now. But I guess I do like the of the cover songs, for example, I do like the stories associated with things like the Metal Gear Rising cover or the Dark Souls cover. Like, I think the songs turn out fantastic and the people I worked with are fantastic. And, stuff like that is really great. I'd say for original works, I will say that my guilty pleasures on the Viscerafest album are Cult Shuffle and End of the Line. Like, they're overly electronic and they're pretty ridiculous, and I like those ones a lot. Even though I think the metal ones are probably the fan favorites there. With Atomic Heart, that one's a tough call. I really do like, as I said, For the Good of Mankind pushed me to do some stuff that I'd never done before. I think that one, more than the metal one, I think that one is that feels a little bit more, that means a little more to me. I had to work a lot harder on that one than the metal stuff because I had done the metal stuff so much. And then that remix I just mentioned, I really like that one too. But I know the story behind that one, and that's part of it. It's I think that's what it is. But yeah, it's really hard to pick. That is a hard question. It's only going to get worse. The more stuff that ends up having, more stuff that I do, I'm going to probably answer it the exact same way.
For sure. Final question, and then I'll let you off because you've been too kind and giving me this amount of time anyways.
Oh, no worries.
What's next, or can you say what's next?
Yeah, things are a little bit up in the air. I have more covers for sure. I just shot a music video, as I said. I'm not going to tell you what that's for yet, but that's coming up. That's going to be cool. I saw some screens. First time I've ever done one of those. We'll see if I have good guitar faces or not. I'm not sure. And yeah, and that's it's a little open-ended right now. So I have a couple of things here and there, and there's just more YouTube to do for sure. And I am keeping an eye out on game work. We'll see how things go. It's like this could change things, or it could not. I don't know. Or it could totally bomb my career. Like, my career could be over. Like, I don't know. Like, who knows? It's always a work in progress. So we shall see. But yeah, there's some stuff in the short term. March and April, you're going to see some things coming. So just keep an eye out for those things on my YouTube channel. What
I can gather is a well-deserved break. it's what it is
well,
now.
I can't take a break. There's always more to do. I wish I could. I wish I could take a month off. I just don't. I have anxiety. I don't want to take a month off. I'm afraid. I'm like, but how will I pay the bills if I'm not doing work? Like, I don't have enough. Passive income is only so good when you're a musician. You got to like do stuff too. I don't know how many of us are rich, but I'm not.
No.
One day maybe, but I don't expect
it. Geoff, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out. I mean, it's been great to see all the work that you've done over the last 2 years. I mean, I still don't know how you crammed it into 2 years, but fair play on doing that.
Yeah. See the bags under my eyes? That's probably how.
Oh no, everyone has them now. It's a normal thing now. Geoff, don't worry. It's in style, I think.
Good.
But alongside that, though, I mean, I can't wait to see what you're coming up with next, regardless of whatever it is. I'm sure it'll be interesting and head banging, or if not, it'll be very soothing and orchestral, and we'll still love it, Geoff.
I
Thank you so
appreciate
much. Finally, though, where can people find you if they want to check out more of your work? If, by some account, they've watched this video and don't know who you are.
Yeah, totally. Well, assuming there will be links, definitely check the description of this video.
Yes.
I am on YouTube primarily as Geoff Plays Guitar. I have Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is Geoff Plays Git. It's like GUIT, but I couldn't get the rest, so as that. And then Instagram is Geoffrey Day Music. If you search Geoffrey Day, you'll probably find all of my information. I'm Geoff Plays Guitar and Geoffrey Day. My stuff is the first that shows up on Google. So just Google that stuff. You'll find everything. Those are primarily, I have stuff on Bandcamp. In all of my YouTube videos, I have links to everything. So if you find one, you'll find them all.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much again, Geoff. And thank you very much.